Welcome to Living in Connection, where we explore the nature of physical and non-physical reality and what that means in your life.
Well, hello and welcome back again. We're continuing our discussion between myself, Frank DeMarco, and Peter Grazier. So I think where we were headed is, Frank, you're going to start us off talking about our smaller groups and intuitive link communication and how Peter joined us and go on from there.
And we will proceed in our usual tightly formatted procedure. A while ago, what I call the guys upstairs, which is an undefined bunch of non-3D intelligences that I've been dealing with for like 25 years. A while ago, they created what they called, and this is their title for it, ILC, Intuitive Linked Communication. And they called it that because they said they wanted to emphasize that what we're doing, what I'm doing when I'm talking to them, is the same thing we do when we talk to each other, or we do when we're talking to a spirit, or anything. It is a form of, it is the underlying form of communication. The difference between ILC, one difference between ILC and channeling tends to be, I'm going to receive and I'm going to give you as best I can what I receive from there. You know, so that would be Jane Roberts channeling Seth, or Edgar Casey channeling whatever his source was. But ILC is different. They want it more interactive, intuitive, back and forth. They have made a very strong repetition of the fact, they said, we are not gods and you are not worms. In the first place, we also extend into non-3D as well as 3D. But beyond that, they said, or someone else said, but it doesn't matter, it's the same thing. Too much respect is as distancing as contempt. And if you put them on too high a pedestal, you may not be able to climb that pedestal. And they don't belong there and they don't want to be there. So the whole idea about ILC was, and I do it with a pencil and paper in a journal. I know Dirk does it that way. Dirk does it. I think you use the computer a lot, I think, just directly to the computer. And
Right.
many people do it just in speech. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you're comfortable with. But the idea is to keep your own mind active and participating, but at the same time receptive to other input without having to worry about, who is this? Can I trust them? Where do they come from? What's the social security number? You know, none of that makes any difference. The odd thing is, and I've discovered it more and more as I've done it, I can no longer tell the difference between what I'm calling ILC and what our ordinary means of communication is anyway. Now, I've told Dirk many times I don't actually think. I do more like dredging. You know, I wait for something to well up and then I'll say it, which can get you into a lot of trouble. But thinking is a different thing. Thinking is, here's this, and now how does this fit with this, and how does this fit with that? But being receptive is a different skill. I suppose it's a skill. All right, that's enough about that. Doing that and having several friends who knew about it. Gosh, Dirk, you know, I can't remember anymore how we started this group. We started it about 5 years ago.
April 2020. It was not long after the COVID had started, and Zoom came around, which was new, or at least first time most of us had heard of it. And it turned out it was a way for us as friends to connect. And very quickly we realized, we ought to form a group. And so we did.
Do you remember how that happened?
Just that simply.
It just happened.
I think Dave was involved in that to some.
I wouldn't be surprised. Dave Garland, yeah, Dave, our resident shaman. In any case, we have about maybe a dozen people who show up every week, more or less. It varies. We have about 30 people, I think, on that list who often watch without doing it. And then we subdivided into smaller groups, one of which is what we call the engineers. And I insinuated myself into that group, even though I'm not an engineer. But
yeah, we kind of regretted that.
Well, I'm hoping so. I wouldn't want my efforts to be for nothing. But it's interesting. I suppose everybody must know, if you have a discussion between two people, it can come to a depth that you probably can't come to with 3, and you certainly aren't going to come to with 30. You know, so the more people that add into a conversation, on the one hand, they add breadth, but they don't usually add depth. They usually take away from the depth because it's just harder. And I think that's about all I want to say on that, unless you want something else. Oh, by the way, Peter, if your guys want to say something, feel free. Well, we often do that. All right, go ahead, Doctor.
Well, So as we were going along, as you said, Dave was another member of the group, as well as a couple of others who are principally engineers by training, each in very different aspects of life. And then Dave was meeting with Peter at a local cafe and having coffees and all of that, and finally managed to twist his arm to come join us and check it out. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Peter. And how did it happen for you, and what was it like?
Was it good for you
Coming
too?
into the group, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I say, he mentioned it off and on, but it wasn't a pushy kind of thing. He just mentioned it once in a while, but not very often. And then he started a couple months before I went to Monroe. He started beefing that up and saying, you're really ready for this. You really ought to, And so I did. And but in February, it'll be in 2 months in February, it'll be 3 years ago that I guess he got your all permission to bring me into the group, to initiate me into the group, and I just started participating in your meetings each week. Coincidentally, in that same month, I began doing something that I in all the years that I've studied spirit communication, I never thought about journaling at all. And in the same week, just before I came into your group, I 3 times in the same week I had heard about journaling. Somebody telling a story about this and what it meant, and and usually if I hear something 3 times in the same week, it usually is a key to me. I better be paying attention. And I started doing journaling, and so when I even at my first meeting with you all, the only thing I had at the time was an engineering pad. Why not? And now I'm 5 full pads into the journaling, and it's been probably one of my primary ways of hearing them more directly. I hear
Perhaps we
different
should
ways.
mention, perhaps we should mention that a standard feature of our meetings is that Dave will do a shamanic drumming. And Dave has a very nice technique where it's just he's in and out in 5 minutes. And while he does that, we'll usually spend 40 minutes ahead of time trying to figure out what it is we want to drum on. But when we come up with a topic, which sometimes winds up as just a sleigh ride or a joyride, I mean. But in any case, then for 5 minutes, Dave will do the drumming and we will all go upstairs, as I call it, receive whatever we receive, then come back and debrief it. And as you all know, but the readers don't necessarily know, the viewers, the congruence between the various pieces is often striking, especially like in the big group. You might have 12 people, and each one of them seems to have a different piece of the same puzzle, rather than you might expect to go off in different directions. Sometimes it does, but mostly there's a lot of congruence there. Was that a new experience for you, Peter? Had you done that with a group at all?
No, never. I never done anything like that. And this, I had been really looking, and my wife Nance knew I was looking, and that's why. I mean, she's the one that found the original group that Dave was in. That I met him, and then we morphed away from that group, and then eventually I ended up with him in your group. I mean, he's been in your group for years, but that's how I was drawn into this. But again, it's just all directed. It's just I just feel a guidance that takes place, and when something is meant to be. The beauty of this is we all have free will, and that's why we're here. I mean, we're to express that free will and the good and the bad that comes along with that at times. Sometimes our decisions aren't the best in the world, but that's all part of that experience. But in that free will, there's a lot of nudging that can take place too. At least this is my experience. I'll share my
I've never heard
experience.
of that. Have you heard of that, Dirk?
There's a lot of nudging that takes place, and
Oh, yeah.
sometimes it's physical, believe it or not. But there's sometimes it's more. I mean, direct in so many ways, but lots of stories around that. But I
Well,
think another big thing for me was learning to listen. Yeah,
I think one of the other things to mention as we go along is that what we're doing is something that is a little unique in terms of having come along, but other people have done similar things through centuries, no doubt. And this is something like with your kindness band, that it's not limited to, say, our group. Others can go create their own and do this same thing and learn from the kind of experiences that we've had.
absolutely.
If we're
Absolutely.
doing anything, it's just showing a possibility. Anybody who does it, it's going to be different. And the difference is not inferior, the difference is different. And it's a big plus. By the way, Peter, as a visual, I love looking at your fireplace. And
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Dirk, can we center on the fire rather than Peter's face? What do you think? No,
No, no.
Yeah. It's December between Christmas and New Year's here in Portland, Oregon. And it's
Mhm.
always nice to have
It's a little chilly outside.
a little bit. Yeah. I don't know where do we want to go with this? This is good.
all right.
Well,
So,
what was? Go ahead, Frank. Sorry.
well, no, I was gonna suggest that he ask, go upstairs and ask. But if you have
Sure.
something more, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Peter, you wanna see if you guys have something they want to tell us?
Um, let's see. What was there? Did we have a main theme when we started?
No, no, no. Just ask them if they have anything they want to say.
Okay. All right.
They know what's going on.
Well, there's a question that keeps popping up in my
All right.
mind, and that's probably a good indication that I ought to just ask it. And it takes me back to an experience I had, probably the one of the most powerful experiences I ever had. I literally, Nance and I one day sitting in Sausalito, California, just doing our normal life, and the next day we're attending a conference we knew nothing about in Portland, Oregon. How does that happen? That's another story. It's longer, but it occurred. And this conference was called the Afterlife Awareness Conference. It was here in Portland in 2014. And the second day of the conference, and the month before that, I was alone. She was away. I was alone. I sat up in bed one night and I started to have doubts about all this. It's with my engineering mind coming into play, saying, late at night, I sat up in bed. Come on, Pete, spirits out here, really? Barbara out here, really? Come on, And then I said out loud by myself in my bedroom, I just need one more powerful experience to push me over the goal line, to use a tired metaphor. And a month later, I find myself at a conference that I knew nothing about. Literally, first day, I didn't even know. Here, next day, I'm 500 miles away, hotel, everything, attending this conference. And the second day of the conference, I'm walking through the vendor area, and I come across a young medium, and I start asking her about her life. Now, I'd been to mediums, and I wasn't looking for a medium at this time. I just started asking her about her life, and she started to tell me, and that's when she started to look over her shoulder. And you've heard this story before, but it's powerful for me. She started looking over her shoulder like somebody's tapping her on the shoulder, but she's ignoring that, trying to talk to me and tell me about her life. Well, the third time it happened, she turns around. She says, "Come on, do you know somebody by the name of Barbara?" I said, "Yeah, that's my former wife." And she said, "Well, she's really determined, isn't she?" And I said, "You don't know the half of it. This lady is focused like a laser when she wants something." And I've since learned that mediums, to avoid being bothered 24/7 by spirits, can put out boundaries and use their guides to help them with these boundaries. And most spirits will respect those boundaries. Well, this Barbara wasn't respecting any boundaries. She needed to get through. And first of all, that was like a punch in the face right there. It's like a wake up. And it's so typical of her. It's like, and so the lady told me, she said, "Well, I don't normally do it like this," but she said, "If you want, I'll just pass on what she wants to say." And for the next 15 minutes, Barbara told me everything that was going on in my life. And this was several years after the first experience. Okay. And again, the kindness program came into play. I was a little worried that the kindness program might turn into a business, which I didn't want. And she said, "Just go into it, just enjoy it." She brought up my brother. I've been worried about my brother because I'd moved away from Ohio very rapidly to be with Nancy. And she says, "Don't worry about that. He hasn't called you because he's got his own stuff going. It has nothing to do with you." I mean, boom, boom, boom. All these anxieties things are coming off my shoulders. And every time she comes back, it's usually to do that. Where was it going? So
You were saying how the medium was giving you these things.
Oh, the question I wanted to ask you, oh man, I've never done this publicly before. And
Get used to it.
anyway, in a new marriage, I had been told that Barbara's around when I think of her. And here I am in a new marriage. And you could kind of guess where I might be going with this question, but I didn't even know how to ask the question of this young woman. I stuttered and stammered, and I didn't even know how to spit it out. And finally, I just blurted it out. I says, "What does Barbara think when when, Nancy and I are, being intimate, and um, she immediately, the medium, her name is Allison Gannon, the medium looked at me and started to say something and then stopped. And in that moment, she changed completely. The way she said words changed, her voice even changed somewhat. And
Facial expression changed too.
She just stiffened up a little bit. And she said, matters of the body are of no concern in this realm. Have no concern. And in that moment, it was said in it was said even better than I just said it. I wish I had a recording. It was poetic, almost poetic language. And it sounded like a voice of authority saying it. And in that moment, there was an instantaneous knowing. And I use the metaphor, it's like waving a magic wand over my body. All anxiety around that was gone. All concern about that was gone and never came back again. And that took 30 seconds. And then Allison shook herself like this, and she looked at me and she said, I don't know where that came from, but it didn't come from me. Now, this whole thing took less than a minute. And the question that's going on in my mind, because we were talking about channeling, is there a name for that? Is there something, is that a different way of channeling than things we talk about sometimes?
Dirk, call the intervention team. He's back into engineering mode.
Yep.
All of that stuff can be defined, and I think it's a tremendous waste of time to define it.
Good. This is where you go, Frank, and I always appreciate it.
Well, definitions are always going to, good definitions are always going to be somewhat right and somewhat helpful, but they're also going to be somewhat wrong and somewhat misleading. And you don't need, some people sometimes may need definitions. I can imagine that. But if you wanted to say it abstractly in general, like for instance, okay, I call my guys the guys upstairs. And I've never, other than a few that I know that they're individuals, I've never tried to make it definite. And I think it's a good thing. They have even told us that sometimes one of them will substitute for another one in the middle of a sentence that we're getting, and we won't know the difference. Supposing I had their social security numbers, what good would it do me in terms of anything in my actual life to say, well, that was John, that wasn't Luke? I mean, I understand people want certainty about some things, but that's something that I think is a waste of time. Now, I don't know, Dirk, I don't think you disagree with him, but you might.
I don't, but I have a different analogy. So one of the things that people will talk about is wanting to go out of body or doing astral travel or bilocation, all these different things, or at least seemingly different. They're categories that are defined. After many years of doing various parts of that, I saw them merge where each of those is part of aspects of the others. And it's more a matter of focus than anything else about which it is. And in some cases, like with one friend, I ended up helping to pull him out of body. I was out, to my mind, astral, but he saw me physically present, high up in the ceiling area with a beam behind me, out of body. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. How can it be both? Let go of the definitions. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it would be one thing if they helped. But what they usually do is they construct boxes, and then you have to fight your way out of the box. You know what that experience was with that medium. You know for sure that your wife was involved, your first wife was involved in it. You know for sure that whoever came in, whether it was your wife, whether it was God, whether it was Ernest Hemingway, I don't care who, it doesn't matter. The message was there and you got the message. Anything else over that is just window dressing.
No, and I'm gonna chime in there because 3 years ago, I told you I said, how can I find out who's saying what? And you came back and said just this to me. You said, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It only matters if it's helpful. Is it useful? And I'm repeating that for this audience because I've repeated this 100 times to people now since
Oh,
then,
good.
and including myself. Yeah, I understand engineers, Frank. We're curious people. We're curious as all get out,
I would
and
say
we like
downright
to.
odd, really. I wouldn't stop at curious.
All right, we're odd, whatever, but we love to know things. I mean, my wife, she says, I don't understand your curiosity, and she doesn't. But those kinds of comments do put it in another perspective and allows me to pull away from that need to know. Nice to know, yes, but not a need to know anymore. And in fact, I just look at it and I say, I really don't care. The stuff that's in these, I've gone back through my journals over the five pads of journals that I have over 3 years. And I just started reading. I just pulled that pad out and I just started reading, and I read about 10 of them. And I just marveled I just marveled at the wisdom that's in there and the advice that I've been given and that kind of thing. Uh, I just don't question it anymore. It's been totally useful, totally helpful, and has created an enormous boost, catalyst for my expansion. I really appreciate it.
That's all great. The one thing though that I would take a slight exception to, I think you tend to rate yourself too much as a learner or as a beginner or as
Mhm.
not quite up to speed and all of that. And that's it's a nice trait in terms of humility, but it's not necessarily helpful to you because you're sort of underrating where you are. You couldn't
Okay.
get this stuff if you weren't ready to get it, and if you weren't ready to get it, you would just be saying, "Well, this is nonsense," or whatever you would say.
I mean, we're all learners, right?
Yeah, exactly. At all levels. One of the other things too, and I don't know why I want to bring this up, but I think it applies, is that one of the other unique traits with engineers is quite often, if you walk into a engineer space, the walls are blank. And it isn't lack of imagination. What it ends up being is it's a place to have all of the stuff that's going through their thoughts where they can project it. And you don't need the picture on the wall necessarily because the picture's in your head. Now, that's not always true, but it is something that I've seen quite commonly.
That's an interesting thought. I like to have stuff to jog my memory, you might say. Things even like this, which I have kept many years. I guess I probably had this 25 years now. That's a
Yeah.
miniature of Salisbury Cathedral. And I went there in 2000 and I had a fairly profound experience. Every time I look at that, I can remember it. That doesn't mean I would remember it if it weren't there, so I like to have it around. But I hear what you're saying. But again, Dirk, we've already established that engineers are somewhere between curious and odd. So this
Yeah.
is
Well, I think where that goes, though, I think the reason I brought it up is that everybody processes things somewhat differently. And groups of people of different types tend to process more like each other than other groups. But how different people do process, each one of us does it our own way. And I think that also then goes to back to your question, Peter, of what was this? How did this happen? Even how you experienced it will be different from somebody else sitting right next to you experiencing the same event. And so a large part of what we're trying to do is classify things that maybe don't have classifications really. They've got gray edges, if you will. But it's also a matter not just of what it is, but of who you are and where you are in the moment in being able to understand it.
if I may say so, again, Dirk, I've often said you tend to go for the what and I go for the why,
Right.
meaning you want to know what it is and how it interacts with other things and what precedes the other, and it's very valuable. And I don't mean why, like why did it happen now, but why did it happen to me now? What's the point in my existence? And the reason I mention that, Peter, is it's quite clear to me you have been on this journey long, maybe before you even knew you were. And
Yes.
the more you have opened up to it, the more else has opened up, and then you go, "Wow, this is magic! I'm so lucky." And yes, you are lucky, but who was it? Somebody said luck is the best prepared person. And you are prepared for it. I don't know if it's emotionally or shall we say psychic. Your soul is looking for depth, and you keep finding experiences that keep adding to the depth, and your engineering mind keeps anchoring it to life, which is a very damn valuable thing. You don't want to be a woo-woo. Well, I mean, maybe I guess the world needs some people floating around, but I think they need some engineers. Let's call you recovering engineers who
Yeah.
are, well,
Well, there's a perfect timing for everything. And I can remember I had three out of body experiences in my 30s, all spontaneous. One under marijuana, the only time I ever smoked it, and two under stress. And you'd think that would be a enormous propulsion into to the inquiry of this whole subject. I didn't do anything with it. I don't even know if I told anybody about it at the time. I
actually,
I
that doesn't surprise me. And you continued with your life
I continue
ostensibly.
with my life, and I look back. This was in my 30s when my career was on a trajectory at that time, and then I was starting a business toward the end of my 30s, and and I was on such a busy trajectory that I didn't have really the time to investigate something else. It just wasn't ready.
It wasn't the time of your life yet.
But now that in this last 17 years, I've tried to describe, it has become center stage. I mean, I now understand what that is. And when somebody says they died on an operating table for a few minutes and went out of their bodies, I know exactly what they're talking about because I've been there.
Mhm.
And it was three powerful experiences that I can go back to now and anchor back. At age 23, my dad died in a plane crash, and 3 weeks later, I had a dream that I knew was not a dream. I woke up in the middle of the night after that dream was over, and I knew it wasn't a dream. I didn't have words for it. I didn't know how to describe it. But now that I'm studying more of this, it just all begins to come together. And
If you're like me, the fact that at that time you didn't have an interest in all of this and didn't have back
right,
knowledge of it actually makes it more persuasive. It's actually more powerful. I know I didn't make that up. I wasn't thinking in those terms, right? Yeah.
I had a dream after my basic training when I got drafted into the military in 1966 during Vietnam. Uh, I had a couple of years of college and they needed officers, so I was on my way to officer candidate school. And between my basic training and the next training, more advanced infantry training, and one was in Georgia and the other was in California. And I went home for Christmas and I had another extremely powerful dream that I was a second lieutenant in Vietnam and was immediately killed.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it was so powerful, so gripping that when I went to California for the advanced training prior to the officer candidate school, I dropped out of the program. I said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to become an officer. And they ended up sending me to Berlin, Germany. And then whenever I got orders there to go to Vietnam, my new wife, who was working there in the payroll department for the Americans, she was a German citizen working in it. She heard that, and again, this wife that I'm telling you is like a laser missile when she wants something. Being in up with personnel and everything, she went right up to the personnel people and said, "You keep my husband off that list." There was a list for people like me to go to Vietnam, and she said, "You keep my husband off that list," and they did. And so I still didn't go to. I mean, I had these trajectories that were sort of heading me in a direction that got truncated. I don't know, by the universe, I guess, and saved my life. These you don't and see it's the ability to look back and look at these and say, oh my God, this is all connected.
Mhm.
This is all connected. And so the big learning for me in the last, I don't know, 15 years, 17 years, I keep getting hammered on listen, 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 listen. And so today, if I'm in a conversation with somebody and they put me in front of people all the time, they connect me with people who have lost someone within the previous year. So um, today, I don't edit what I'm saying to them. I used to really think, well, I can't say this to them. I don't edit it anymore. I just let it go. And
You're receptive and you serve. That's your
it's
service.
it's a learning to listen. It's listening to what I'm hearing. And
Well, it's listening, but it's also not censoring, which is as
not
important.
censoring. Yes, that's a
And
big one.
and people watching this, I hope they heard that. The not
Yes.
censoring is a very important thing. Again, guys, we've gone about half an hour. We can go as long as you want, but I'm just giving you the time
It's a
check.
fast half hour.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I
we
think
did.
Peter's got a commitment. He needs to go meet with Dave, so we probably should close it up. But Peter, you're welcome to come back, and we can
Oh my
continue
God.
this or other discussions. And
Well, if you think it's useful,
Well, the problem is
I
you're
did
so
it again, Frank.
tongue-tied.
I did it again for your benefit.
You know, Dirk, we need to get somebody here who knows how to talk. He's so tongue-tied, it's embarrassing. It's like having Jimmy Stewart on here, you know?
you have to drag it out of him. It's just so hard.
That's terrible. All right,
By the
guys.
way, the interplay between you two, because you are so different in your basic personalities, has been very interesting. I've watched all these podcasts, and they've been very interesting. And I think you got something going. I mean, Abbott and Costello, which most people listening, young people, they wouldn't even know, or
We've just been insulted, I think, Dirk.
Again,
Or maybe Abbott and Costello have been insulted. It's hard to tell.
yeah.
All
all
right.
right. Well, listen, I could say Laurel and Hardy too, but that wouldn't work either. But anyway, let it go. And thank you for inviting me. And I'll come back anytime you want.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds like a plan. See you
Well,
guys.
thank you, and thank you, everybody. We'll see you again next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please press like. Please press subscribe to stay informed of new episodes as they appear. We would love to hear from you in the comments section below, and we wish you the very best in connecting with your own guidance.